Welcome to the deep dive. Strategy is one of those words we hear everywhere. Business, career moves, even just figuring out dinner sometimes.
Absolutely. It feels like the bread and butter for getting ahead, doesn't it? Whether you're in politics, starting a business, climbing the corporate ladder, or even in the military.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into the very idea of strategy itself.
That's right. We're looking closely at the work of Professor Senthil Kumar, who's associated with School of Fish Strategy Consulting.
Yeah.
He really challenges a core assumption we all make.
We should.
That competition is everything, the ultimate measure of success. Our mission today is to sort of unpack his argument for why strategy, especially now, has to move beyond just rivalry towards cooperation.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Before we get to cooperation, maybe define what we usually mean by strategy. The traditional view that Professor Kumar is kind of pushing back on.
Sure. Traditionally, strategy is all about getting an edge. It's seen as, a unique pattern in your decisions, right?
Yeah.
All aimed at a specific goal.
And that goal is usually winning.
Pretty much. Securing a competitive advantage. That could mean higher profits, sure, or maybe more market share. Sometimes it's about technological supremacy or, using disruptive tactics to shake things up.
So finding ways to outsmart the competition.
Exactly. If you boil it all down, the common thread is winning the competition. That's the classic take.
Right, that feels familiar. We're all taught to compete, aren't we? But Professor Kumar says this focus, especially on a global scale, is hitting some serious limits now.
He does. He argues that the old way of thinking just doesn't scale effectively in our modern globalized world.
Why is global success the sticking point?
It really comes down to complexity and reach. If a company wants to be truly successful globally today, cooperation isn't just nice to have, it's actually required.
Cooperation with who? Like local suppliers?
It goes much deeper than that. It requires really sophisticated cooperation between the company itself and the actual nation states where it operates.
Okay, but hang on. Isn't cooperation sometimes seen as, a bit soft or slow? Maybe even anti-capitalist in the dog-eat-dog world of global business. Why is it inevitable, as you said?
Well, the argument is that no single company, no matter how big, really has the influence or the sheer wherewithal, the resources, the legal clout, the diplomatic skill to navigate these incredibly complex international waters alone.
That makes sense.
And there's another layer. A company's operations abroad are always tangled up in the foreign policies and international relations of those host countries.
So it's not just business strategy anymore, it's geopolitics too.
Precisely. And that whole dimension, international relations, that's a strategic reality that's just way beyond what most corporations are equipped to handle on their own.
So for real, lasting global success, competition just isn't enough.
That's the core argument. Collaboration becomes, as he puts it, an unavoidable necessity.
Okay, that really sets the stage. To understand this shift, maybe we should look back. Trace the history of pure competition, starting with what Professor Kumar calls competition for tangible resources.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. When we're talking a long history here, for something like 3 millennia, the absolute critical strategic factor was land.
Owning territory.
Exactly. Land was the goal, the means, everything. And the result? Endless conflict, border disputes, wars, and tragically, things like enslavement and even genocides, all driven by the strategy of acquiring land.
And it's not just ancient history, is it? You mentioned this quest continues.
Oh, absolutely. We still see border disputes, obviously. But think about the new frontiers, technologically stronger nations staking claims in the Arctic, the Antarctic. There's even talk about Mars.
Wow. So the technology changes, but the basic impulse.
The impulse to compete for tangible territory remains. Then, as we move into, say, medieval and colonial times, the focus shifts a bit, but it stays tangible.
Like what?
Gold, mines, oil, minerals, even livestock, like cattle and horses. And depressingly, even people seeking a cost advantage through forced labor. Strategy evolved alongside technology, too.
How so?
Well, it wasn't just about having the biggest army anymore. It became about technological advantage cannons, war elephants back then, later shifting to naval power, nuclear weapons, air forces today.
So a constant race for the next physical advantage.
Right. And looking at this relentless focus on physical domination, the philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti had a pretty sharp critique. He called it glorified tribalism.
Glorified tribalism, that's quite a statement.
It is. The implication is that despite all our sophisticated strategies, maybe we're still stuck in a very basic, zero-sum way of thinking about resources, competing for a finite pie.
Okay, that's a powerful critique of competing for stuff. But then another kind of competition emerged, maybe even deadlier. The competition for the intangible, for ideas, for minds.
Yes, exactly. The battle for who had the right truth. This was fueled by big ideas, things like emancipation, various religious doctrines, political ideologies like democracy, capitalism, socialism.
Ideas presented as solutions.
Often, yes. Prophets, professors, they carried these ideas forward, often claiming this was the one true path out of poverty or scarcity or whatever the crisis was.
What are the consequences? The source material suggests something really sobering here.
It does. The analysis points out that historically, it's likely that more people have been killed in the name of finding the right God or the right political truth than from all the natural disasters, diseases, and famines put together.
That's almost unbelievable. It speaks volumes about the danger of purely ideological rivalry.
It really does. And it raises a fundamental question about how humans design things, including strategies. Nature, through evolution, uses a kind of optimal search, trial and error, chance, finding what works long term. But human designs, Professor Kumar argues they're too often driven by things like ego, greed, our own cognitive biases, even just sheer stupidity or error from leaders.
So not necessarily optimal.
Rarely optimal, especially when actions are guided by what the source calls charade and pretense, this deep-seated belief that what we think and do is absolutely right. The outcomes aren't geared towards sustainability or the best for everyone.
So if competition, whether for land or ideas, is often based on these flawed human designs, what's the historical verdict? Does pure rivalry actually lead to a win?
Well, Professor Kumar's conclusion is pretty stark. He argues that most competitive actions, viewed over the long term, actually result in a devastating lose-lose outcome.
A lose-lose. Can you give an example?
The clearest, most dramatic example is probably the 2 world wars in the 20th century. Think about the cost: 50 million young lives lost, entire continents ravaged.
It's horrific.
Absolutely horrific. And for what? The analysis shows there was no real advantage gained by any nation involved. No significant land, no precious resources that could possibly justify that immense sacrifice.
So the strategic aims were completely bankrupted by the outcome, a total systemic failure of competition.
That's the argument. The loss was absolute on all sides relative to the cost. So, if these ultimate acts of competition led to such failure, what was the only way forward?
It had to be cooperation, didn't it?
It had to be. And what's astonishing is how quickly it happened. The very same nations that were locked in deadly combat came together relatively soon after the wars.
Why? What drove that?
Mutual need. They needed trade, market access, economic stability. They realized, maybe implicitly at first, that interdependence was the only viable path forward.
So necessity forced their hand.
It seems so. And this necessity introduced a new concept, or at least brought it to the forefront: co-opetition.
Co-opetition, competing and cooperating at the same time.
Exactly. It became the sort of new, perhaps more promising global order. The insight here is crucial. Collective growth can actually be limitless if nations approach each other with mutual respect, a bit of forbearance, and a willingness to share power.
Okay, let's bring this back to the world of business strategy now. Historically, the idea was that a company's main job was self-interest, right? Just make money for the owners.
Yes, that traditional view gave businesses a kind of amoral imperative, focused solely on maximizing owner wealth. This led to that social perception of caveat emptor, buyer beware. The business isn't necessarily looking out for you.
And Professor Kumar critiques this profit-centric view pretty harshly.
Very harshly. He argues that reducing strategy only to chasing short-term quarterly profits or just beating a competitor's return on equity fundamentally strips businesses of their broader social significance.
How so?
Well, the source uses this really stark image. It's this mere profit outlook, drains organizations of their sort of spiritual and creative lifeblood. It turns these potentially dynamic entities into, and I quote, metallic and concrete cans of robots.
Wow, metallic and concrete cans of robots. That's a disturbing picture. What are we losing specifically when that social significance disappears? And how does this tie back to the limits of purely material competition?
What we lose is systemic health, overall economic optimality. Think about it this way. If you have parts of the economy like, say, financial markets or hedge funds, promising crazy high returns, 40% plus profitability.
Right, which isn't sustainable for most businesses.
Exactly. That sets an impossible bar for the whole system. Most traditional essential firms, agriculture, manufacturing, they simply cannot match those kinds of profit goals consistently.
So the competition becomes skewed.
It becomes dysfunctional. In that environment, pure competition doesn't lead to a healthy balance. It actually creates systemic inefficiency. It forces good, necessary companies towards bankruptcy or into making terrible short-term decisions just to chase an unreachable target.
So the hyper-competition itself can damage the whole ecosystem.
That's the argument. It degrades the overall economic health, which leads to the proposed solution: mandatory collaboration.
And that's where the school of fish metaphor comes in.
Precisely. Firms need to recognize they're part of a larger system. They can, and arguably should, compete and collaborate simultaneously, like a school of fish.
How does that work in nature?
Well, in nature, swimming in a coordinated formation enhances the survival and efficiency of each individual fish, right? But it also improves the stability and optimality of the entire group.
Okay, I see the analogy.
Applied to business, it might mean rivals finding ways to, say, manage capacity together or ration profits or subsidies to avoid that kind of destructive race-to-the-bottom competition that causes systemic crashes.
So if chasing material gains profits, market share has these inherent systemic limits, where does strategy go next?
It has to shift towards the intangible, towards seeking advantage through things like intelligence, knowledge, or wisdom, whether that's artificial intelligence or the real humankind.
And the purpose of business itself needs to evolve.
Absolutely. It has to move beyond just profit. It needs to embrace a larger role in society, even in the planet's well-being.
How does a company do that strategically?
By fundamentally shifting its strategic focus towards social exchanges, building genuinely trustworthy relationships, emphasizing reciprocity, sharing power, not just hoarding it, ensuring a safety net for people, thinking about equitable resource distribution and shared governance.
These sound less like traditional business metrics and more like social contracts.
In a way, yes. But the argument is that these are the elements that create lasting, non-depleting competitive advantage in the long run.
So the ultimate strategic goal shifts from winning market share to winning love and trust. That sounds almost radical in a business context.
It does, doesn't it? But the core idea is building what Professor Kumar calls trust equity.
Trust equity, how is that different from, say, brand equity or market equity?
He argues it's far more valuable and durable. Market equity, stock price, that can fluctuate wildly. Brand equity can be damaged overnight by a scandal. But trust equity, that's built slowly, painstakingly, through consistent, demonstrable, non-opportunistic behavior. Showing competence, clearly, but also showing that the firm provides a general benefit to humanity, not just to its shareholders. It's the ultimate long-term strategic asset because it's very hard to copy, and it yields enduring loyalty.
So how does a company signal that kind of deep trustworthiness? It can't just be marketing slogans.
Definitely not. It has to be embedded in the company's actions and ethos. The source material points to a motto, Veritas, Iuris, Sinceritas.
Which translates to?
Truth, excellence, and honesty. A strategy built on those pillars, dealing truthfully, striving for genuine excellence in what you do, and operating with sincere, honest intent. That's the pathway to building the kind of long-term trust that goes way beyond the next quarterly report.
Wow, okay, this has been quite a journey. We started with strategy as this, well, almost brutal military concept, take the land, beat the rival.
Right, the traditional view.
And we've ended up here with strategy framed as a kind of moral imperative, focused on global cooperation, social well-being, and building trust. It's a radical rethinking.
It really is. And the historical thread running through it seems pretty clear. The narrow focus purely on competition and material gain has, again and again, proven to be a systemic lose-lose proposition in the long run.
Forcing an evolution.
Exactly. That history of failure has essentially forced us towards needing collaboration based on these deeper intangible assets like trust, shared knowledge, and a sense of common purpose. That, Professor Kumar argues, is the strategic reality we have to engage with now.
Well, let's leave our listeners with Professor Senthil Kumar's powerful summation. It's certainly a thought to carry into any strategic thinking we do.
Indeed. It's simply this. Strength of a strategy is its moral intent.
Strength of a strategy is its moral intent. Powerful stuff. We hope this deep dive into cooperation versus competition has given you plenty to chew on, whether you're making big corporate decisions or just planning your next move.
Thanks for joining us.
We look forward to the next deep dive into the ideas shaping our world.